In 2020, our pollster Matt Towery's numbers in the Florida presidential race came within 0.49% of the actual returns, and he's ranked among the most accurate pollsters in the nation. In fact, Real Clear Politics ranks national pollsters by accuracy, or how close they were to the winning candidate's actual vote margins in polls going back to 2016. And since 2016, here are the rankings of multi-state pollsters. And there's Matt Towery's insider advantage, ranked second in the nation behind Iowa pollster and Seltzer. And here's his final poll for Fox 13 before the election. It gives Governor Ron DeSantis a 53-43 lead over Charlie Crist, and Senator Marco Rubio a 51-45 lead over Val Demings. So we're zooming in, Matt, for tonight's Spotlight. Please welcome Fox 13 pollster Matt Towery. Thank you once again. Let's start with the U.S. Senate race. Here you have Marco Rubio leading by 6 points, but what's notable is that he is above 50%.
Yes, and also I noticed in comparing our survey that we conducted for Fox 13 last month that both Val Demings and Charlie Crist lost ground just a little bit each time. And I think that's associated with President Biden's disapproval rating, which has really plummeted in the last month here in Florida. And I think that's sort of holding both of these candidates back a bit.
With only 2.5% undecided in the Senate race, is there anything at this point Val Demings can do to try to pull off a surprise?
Well, you know, it's all about turnout, as you know better than anyone, Craig, so that you could always have a push up in turnout at the last minute. That would make these races closer. She certainly is closer to Rubio than Charlie Crist is to DeSantis, but it's going to be hard pressed.
There was a divergence in messaging. When President Biden came to South Florida, he focused on economic and pocketbook issues, social insurance, Medicare, and Social Security. Val Demings has been focusing on abortion. Explain that.
I don't think abortion is an issue in the state of Florida this year for the vast majority of voters, because for the first time, and you and I have done a lot of polls in the state. You've seen many, and I've conducted a large number. I've rarely seen a situation where the gender gap on the female side is as little as it is in these races. Normally, a female candidate nominee for a governor, U.S. Senate, will carry about a 15-point margin advantage versus their Republican opponent. And then it flips the other way with men. And that's what gives us our close races in Florida. This time, it's melted down to about a 4-point advantage among women voters for Demings, which is basically nothing.
How do you explain that?
I don't know. I mean, actually, I'm seeing a much bigger gender gap in my polls for Fox affiliates, for example, in Pennsylvania or Arizona, some of the really competitive states like Georgia. But here in Florida, the gender gap has just gone down to nothing. I think in part because we tend to be a state that focuses a little more on economic issues, because we're obviously a big travel hospitality type state. And that seems to be very important to us. So maybe pocketbook issues have become more important to people in Florida than perhaps some other states where they don't depend as much on a strong economy to keep the main industries that they have moving.
In the race for governor, DeSantis has a 10-point lead over Charlie Crist, more than 50%, 3.5% thereabouts undecided. At that point, is there anything at this point Charlie Crist could do differently?
Well, you know, he brought Biden into South Florida, and you could say in one sense, why would you bring in such an unpopular president? But he's very popular in the counties that they went to, and maybe he's getting that turnout up a little bit. So that could make this a little closer. Maybe it's not a 10-point race, an 8-point, 6-point race, whatever. I don't think there's much he can do to actually win the race right now.
Your polls have been spot on year after year. Many others have been off. How do you know that your poll this time and others are not significantly off, as we've seen others be in the past?
I know that we are highly rated by a good number of groups who think that we're able to sort of pick up voters that other pollsters have not been able to pick up. But I also know that anything can happen. And so I could be on the air on Wednesday eating a lot of crow trying to explain how I got this off. I don't think I am. We're using the same methodology. We always do the same weighting. And I know Florida about as well as any state I poll, and I poll almost all of them, but anything can happen.
Well, and you look at polls not just for the top line numbers, but for the traction and the movement. That's very important in the closing hours before the election. Which way is the momentum, the movement going at this point?
Well, the movement is moving towards DeSantis and Rubio, but that's not the fault of these two Democratic candidates per se. We're seeing this take place in Arizona and Pennsylvania, even in states that I thought could never have even close races, like Washington State, the Michigan governor's race. And I'm not saying that necessarily the Republicans are going to carry a deep blue state like Washington State or Michigan, but something has happened, and I've explained this on my national programs over and over again. Something happened 3.5 weeks ago. I can almost tell you exactly when these races just completely turned around the country.
Well, 3.5 weeks ago, that would be the consumer price index numbers that showed that inflation appears to be re-accelerating. Do you think that's it?
I think that is it. I think it's a combination of that. People start to concentrate more, as we say, after Labor Day, and they start looking at the various aspects of what's affecting them individually as voters and in their lives. And I think all of that sort of just came together for some reason. But it's interesting because it survived individual scandals. I mean, for example, we're polling for Fox 5 in Atlanta, and Herschel Walker, each time a bad thing comes out about him, his numbers go up, not down. So there's something going on well beyond the power of the individual candidates or what their foibles or what their favorabilities might be.
Matt Towery, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Craig.